Welcome to a late night large that never shirks from reminding you to shut your big fat mouth, cover your ugly mush, and keep your filthy hands to yourself, for fuck's sake. Your horny Skeletor is me, Aaron Bliss, and the Mexican wrestling champ, formerly known as Nacho Large, is Mike Large.
Good eve.
How we doing, Mike?
Yeah. Growing dirty as usual, but yeah, we're all right.
Yeah,
Surviving, aren't we? Yeah, representing. We'll just remind you, sir, of the government guidelines and regulations around wearing a mask. If you could, if you could pop yours on, thank you very much.
If I must, but I'm afraid I'm going to blow you out of the water because what do we have here? Oh, is that
nice.
that a late night large mask?
It is. So here's a question for you, and I know this is going to be like everyone is going to want to know the answer, so I will ask it.
Okay.
How do we get our hands on one of those?
Oh, well, you two can look as sexy as I do. All you need to do is send a signed check. Just leave it blank. Just a blank check. Just date it, sign it. Made out to Late Night Large. Just date it. Or us, Aaron Bliss, Mike Large. One of us will sort it out. And then we will, in return, send you one of these glorious Late Night Large branded face masks. It's never looked so good to cover yourself up.
Yeah, it's the opposite of what I would usually kind of support. Like normally, I'm about get naked and be free. But
yeah, no, that's a fair point. Particularly in the summertime, obviously. Although it's interesting, Mike, because one of the things that's been pretty consistent, I guess, at least over the last week, if not longer than that, is it feels a lot more like autumn. I mean, the weather's been precipitous, to say the least. I'm not sure it stopped raining for the entire week.
Yeah, it's pretty miserable right now as we record this. So
it's a bit gloomy, isn't it?
Is it not raining where you are?
Where I am, a few miles down the road from you.
Yeah.
No, it's a kind of a blue sky with little kind of smoky clouds now and again.
It's pissing it down here.
Yeah, I see over there actually. The other window, it's there's a bit of gloom riding over. So.
Yeah, that's me. I'm the gloom riding over you.
Yeah, growing dirty. So another thing that happened this week, Mike, that I thought we could touch upon, or rather ask for your opinion on, is the conclusion to the Premier League. Finally finished, didn't it?
Yay!
What's your thinking on the final table?
Well, okay, so
I think
obviously the main talking point, I suppose, would be the and it pains me to say, champions. Yeah, so Liverpool, congratulations, you won the Asterix Cup, and fair play. You got, they deserved it. You have to say over the course of the season, all things considered. What can you say other than that? I certainly don't want to say anything else that's could be construed as nice, because I feel like that is about as nice as they deserve.
Okay, it's enough about old.
But we knew that was going to happen, didn't we? We knew that was already, they were already champions. It just now it's actually concluded.
Yeah.
Obviously, who'd have thought that we'd have finished third?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was chuffed with the third place. Now, obviously, normally that's not something to crow about. But if you consider where we were in January, that's a pretty epic conclusion to the season to finish third.
Yeah.
Especially, I mean, I know not everyone's going to agree with this, but I personally think the media is incredibly favourable to Frank Lampard compared to Ollie. I think
The media, really?
Yeah, I think sort of sports journalists and whatever, they give him a very easy ride, old Frank. It's like, oh, we love Frank. He's scored so many goals. He's like
Do you
Chelsea.
think that makes a difference?
Huh?
Do you think that makes a difference?
No, what I was saying was, I think it makes it all the more satisfying that Ollie has overtaken him. And yeah, I know what Chelsea fans will come back with. Oh well, look who's in the FA Cup final, which is a fair point. I was pretty good about that, but still in the Europa League, aren't we? Could still win that.
Yeah. No, that would be it would be a good trophy to win, I suppose, again. But it's not what we. No, it would. It definitely would. But it's not. It's not what we want, is it?
What would you have preferred to win the Europa League or the FA Cup?
It's a good question. I
think it's a tough one, but I don't think you can turn your nose up at a European trophy. With all due respect to the FA Cup, you're beating teams from all over Europe. You're compared to just in your home country. And yeah, I know you say, oh, the top six in England is a lot stronger than the vast majority of Europe. Yes, but you can get a very favourable draw in the FA Cup and hardly play any of them till the final. Europa League, how many fucking games do you have to go through to win that? It's a pretty epic achievement if you do.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I'd say Europa League.
Cool. Okay, glad we could agree on that. So going back to what we were going, and by the way, I'm taking this off, Mike, because I need to have a drink. So,
Fine,
but yeah, don't forget this, okay? Remember what I said. So, stamp addressed envelope. How are you finding the mask situation, Mike? Because of course, as we discussed last week, you're on the front line. You are the top dog when it comes to deciding which masks are appropriate for letting clientele into your establishment. So how's that gone?
You know what? It's actually been not as bad as I thought it would be. I'm trying to make it sound as positive as I can, but not as bad as I thought it would be. It's good. So it's been all right. There's not been bad. Touch wood. So there's no major kind of uproar for me personally, anyway. Yeah, so it's been all right. But a couple of people, people make some like funny comments, and you just find yourself rolling your eyes, thinking, "Fucking pull up." But that's about it, really. It hasn't been that bad.
Yeah, I have to admit, probably judging by the sort of media whipping it up, and I don't know, other sources where it felt like there was going to be a real groundswell against it, and people were just not going to accept it in relatively large numbers.
I mean, there kind of has been still, hasn't there?
But I'm not I mean, just because it's your establishment is okay doesn't mean it hasn't happened all over the country. But I don't know. I haven't read any major stories of. I mean, if you compare it, say, to the US, where we see many videos of people walking into shops, proud of their refusal to wear masks, thinking it makes them some kind of rebel hero, shouting abuse at shop staff and whatever. If you look at this country, we've not got you might get someone making a wisecracking, smart-ass comment, something like that, or those puffins who come in and they've got it over their mouth and then they untuck it so their nose is free. These kind of idiots, or they see someone they know and they pull it down to their chin so they can talk to their friend. So, other than these kind of people, it does seem like it's been received okay. I don't know what that says about us, Mike. Does that, because there's two ways of looking at that. Does that make us too subservient to the government? Like, oh, we'll do whatever you say, or does it mean that we just give a shit about each other? Like, does it give
I would say to. I would actually probably say neither.
Neither.
I wouldn't say that it's particularly a strong indication of one thing or the other. Because let's be honest, people don't really give a shit about each other, do they?
No, I don't think they do generally. No,
they don't. So it's not that one. So, but then I wouldn't say that we're too subservient either.
Okay, what about this? What about the third option? The third option is the old chestnut of not wanting to look like a lemon. So if it's social decorum. If you see everyone else doing something, you kind of don't really want to draw attention to the fact that you are like sticking two fingers up to convention. What I mean is, if you speak to anyone anywhere in the country, whether it's true or not, because again, there's a big can of worms to open about why people think they think the way they do. But generally, people will say to you, what kind of country are we? What's our collective mindset like? And most people will say, oh, the Brits are kind of small c conservative, So basically, they don't want to rock the boat. Don't want big changes. Kind of the status quo is fine, a little bit this way, a little bit that way, but they don't want, they don't want anything to be changed too much, and they don't want to rock the boat. Do you think maybe that mindset comes into it, where it's like, even though they might oppose the idea of wearing a mask, if everyone else is going to be doing it, well, do I want to be the one to draw attention and like have shop staff like remonstrate with me?
Maybe, or maybe it's just seen as or maybe it's just good old-fashioned British politeness. You don't want to be. People wouldn't want to be considered, impolite or whatever. I suppose it wouldn't really be polite, but
so
I don't know.
Okay, so you think well, it's kind of, you're kind of agreeing with me, but it's more of how they appear, as in they don't want to appear like they're like discourteous.
Or yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it's a bit of that, or and I feel like if it's not more to do with this, then it probably should be. Or it's just a case of who gives a fuck? Put a fucking mask on.
You think that all those big civil liberties advocates suddenly realise it's not really a big sacrifice to have something across your face for like 5 minutes?
I don't give enough of a shit to argue about it. Really, like with everything going on in the world right now, just grow up. Do you know what I mean? Does it matter that fucking much? Like, just grow the fuck up and do what you're supposed to do. Like, if you wanna remonstrate against like having to do X, Y, or Z, or I don't agree with the government making this. Well, I mean, pick your fights, pick your battles, right?
I couldn't have said it any better, Mike. I think the whole hill that you're going to die on thing is very apt. So do you really want to make a big spectacle of yourself over this? Really?
Yeah, I mean, there are things that people are desperate to just not do what they're told for whatever reason, or to disagree. Sometimes it feels like for the sake of it, but they're desperate to do that. Like there are some causes that hold more weight. You know, some arguments that hold more weight, and you know, kick off about those ones. But wearing a fucking mask in a shop, just grow up and do it.
Fair play, Mike. So, okay, it's interesting the way it's turned out so far, or at least we think it is. So going on to the point that the show's kind of named after. So possibly the biggest news this week in terms of related to lockdown is the first failure of the so-called air corridor scheme, which I'm sure everyone has seen in the news now. Is that I think it was with something like 4 hours notice, people who either were about to or were already in Spain have now been told with immediate effect that they must quarantine for 14 days minimum on their return from the country. Now, this was such a surprise that among the people trapped, in inverted commas, in Spain were Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, an actual cabinet minister. So this clearly isn't something that was thought through, but you know, I'm prepared to give the government the benefit of the doubt this time. Maybe they honestly, for once, looked at something and thought, we need to make a quick decision before this gets any further. And that's, to be fair, that's what they've said in the press. They've said, we know this is not going to be convenient for people. This was always a risk. We've gone by the indications that we've seen from Spain that there's been big spikes, not spikes so big as to be disastrous, but like the direction of travel is bad, and this could put us right back in the red, so to speak, in terms of infections. My only argument, Mike, again, is what's the logistics of this? So again, with everything the government announces, I agree with the logic of it. I mean, it must really piss off those people who have, you know, staked all their money on this is their yearly summer holiday, and now they're not going on a summer. And the government, logistically, how's it going to work, Mike? So it's all right to say, by the way, everyone who's in Spain right now, you're going to have to quarantine for 14 days when you get back. Who's going to monitor that? Who's going to make sure their employers make sure that their wages are covered or sick pay is covered for that period?
Well, it's interesting you say that because I mean, I have someone that works for me who's in Spain right now.
Really? Oh dear.
Yeah.
Sorry for you.
Well, yeah, this is the other thing. They don't think about the impact. I mean, I'm sure whatever decision's been come to for the right reasons, I guess. But doesn't make it less of a pain in the ass, does it, for the people that actually have to deal with the consequences of that? And it's not the people that make the decision that have to deal with the consequences, is it?
No.
Never is.
No.
But
yeah, so without getting on the soapbox too much, because I mean, there's far more ammunition that other people can read. I don't need me to say it, but so I mean, it occurs to me, Mike, an easy thing to do. So we realise that Spain's got a big spike in infections. This could be a problem, particularly with a lot of Brits over there. So we decide a decision needs to be made. So we say we need to quarantine these people. Now, isn't there anyone who could? I mean, this is what I mean. Is the government so out of touch that there's not someone in the cabinet or advising ministers that then comes back at them with the cons of that decision? Like, yeah, no, I agree, we need to deal with this, but how is 14 days going to work? How do we know that they're going to quarantine for 14 days? They're not going to be under house arrest. How do we know their employers are going to pay them sick pay? Can they? Sorry, carry on.
I would say, to be fair, would they have known that anyway for any other country? that
So,
isn't
sorry,
in the.
what do you mean?
Well, what I'm saying is, all right, okay, so the Spain thing has been a last-minute
Yeah.
decision, but prior to that, there were countries that you could travel to, but still had to quarantine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how was any of that managed?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not saying this is different. I'm just saying this because Spain is going to be hugely popular, isn't it? It's, let's face it,
Yeah,
the majority of British people. I mean, you know, the stereotype is the working classes go there, but with the situation the way it is, I'm sure a lot of other people who would normally have gone to far more far-flung exotic destinations were thinking, I'm happy just going to Spain. You know, it's just a short hop over the water. You know, spend a bit of time in the sun. That'll be me done. So now all those people are affected. Now, what I was trying to say is, would it not make more sense? I mean, is this beyond the wit of man? Why not redirect existing employees? I mean, you wouldn't have to employ people and train them up, surely. Redirect existing employees the same way you redirect any government agency, the military, the highways agency, whatever. Redirect them all to the major airports for the time period that this is in place. And instead of quarantine, test everyone who comes off the plane and who's heading back to England or Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland. Or is that, I mean, is that a ridiculous idea? Because otherwise you're asking people to quarantine who are potentially perfectly healthy.
you make a good point, actually.
I mean, maybe there's something I'm not seeing, but would it really cost more to just redirect existing staff to have a testing program for everyone who comes back from only these specific countries? So the minute they arrive at the boarding gate or whatever, part of the security as they pass through, check the temperature, get the test, tell them don't go anywhere for 48 hours. We'll let you know what your test is. And that way, you know, the vast majority of people, they could potentially get on with their lives. Well, apologies for that technical interference. As you might see, me and Mike are in a slightly different clothing and a slightly different time of day because a thunderstorm destroyed the connection to Zoom. So lockdown large is having to take place over 2 evenings this time. Where were we, Mike?
I think you were growing on about the whole quarantine thing, and you were saying you just test people when they come back.
That's
in
right.
the airports.
So yeah, so what I was going to, obviously, I'm sure we've given the basic details of what I was suggesting. Now, what I'd like anyone to do who's listening to this, if you know better than me, if you know that there's a good reason why we can't do something as practical as would seem, to just divert resources to test people coming back into the country, please let us know in the comments why that would not be possible.
I'm right in thinking there are, because I know that at the very start there was a shortage, wasn't there, of tests available and stuff. But there's plenty now. There's plenty now, right?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, testing is happening here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
They've got obviously hospitals, care homes. They've got portable test sites set up all over the country. I don't think the supply is a problem now. You could argue maybe it's a supply of staff, but whose fault is that? So
yeah, but a lot of people are being sent tests at home and self-testing. So
yeah,
you don't really need trained people there necessarily to actually do the testing. It's just get the results, isn't it? So maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't know how much extra strain that would put on the people that do that. But
I guess the argument is then, Mike, as well, is that really much different to the situation now, because you're still putting all the onus on the people themselves to do everything, whereas my idea was to get people to proactively test them and then get back to them and say, oh, by the way, you tested positive, please don't leave the house, isolate yourself for this period of time, etc. let people you might have come into contact in the brief period between you going home know that you are positive and will not be able to leave the house for 2 weeks. And it's interesting, Mike, because I was reading some sort of more updates on the situation today. Actually, it's developed a little bit with the air corridor thing. In that,
Right.
Spain is not happy. Obviously, Spain has said, you know, our islands, what is it, the Balearics and some other islands have very low infection rates. Why can't you still allow people to be flying there without quarantine? And I think we've effectively said, la, not listening. We made the decision. Now, I also
Not listening.
yeah, basically, yeah. I think they've been learning from a certain person. Maybe she's in charge of things. You never know. But
God, I fucking hope not. Jesus Christ.
for all our sakes, it was interesting because there was a call into LBC radio, and I know obviously talk radio is generally a joke, but it was interesting because it sounded like someone who knew what they were talking about was calling in, and they effectively said that, contrary to what they like us to believe, this seems to be another announcement that doesn't have any practical follow-on. So basically, the government has announced that people will have to quarantine, but there's no follow-on to ensure that that's actually what's going to happen. And as we discussed before, employers will not be made in any way, whether incentivized or penalized if they don't, will not be made to cover people's lack of payment. And even employers are free to sack people who quarantine. You know, effectively, other than if you can afford to or you're entitled to go to a tribunal, any employer can say, I'm sure you have to quarantine, just come into work tomorrow. And then you say, no, the government says I have to quarantine. If you don't come into work tomorrow, don't bother coming in again. We'll post your P45. You know, what's to stop that from happening? I mean,
Email it these days.
Sorry?
Probably email it, trying to stop posting stuff, aren't they? But yeah, I get your point. Yeah.
Yeah. So what my point is if we read between the lines and put two and two together, is that, and I don't want to, I'd like to believe that, you all know my apparent bias, but I want to believe that the government is learning its lesson and is actually doing the best for the population.
No, you don't, because then you won't be able to slag them off all the time.
Well, do I really want our living standards and everything else to go downhill just for me to get on my pedestal and say, oh, they're all wrong?
Yes.
Some people want to do that, but it's tiring, Mike. It's very tiring. No, but
I bet it is.
So my argument, Mike, is if you read between the lines, and I know, you're a smart guy, and hopefully you can get over your general opposition to me and realise, is this another case? We've said it before. Is this another case of the government handing over responsibility to other people? As in, we told those people to quarantine for 14 days, and if they didn't do it, then, well,
not our fault.
Yeah, it's not our fault. We told them to do it. We told them why they had to do it. Of course, we didn't provide any framework for them to actually do it without getting sacked or go without pay for 2 weeks, but, I don't know. What do you think?
On that, yeah, probably a little bit. But also, it was very much a kind of snap decision, wasn't it? So it would have been hard for them to put that framework in place initially anyway. That doesn't mean they shouldn't work on it, or maybe they are.
Mike, I tell you what, I'd happily say, fair play to you. Maybe the government is trying to be competent and actually somebody said to them, oh, hold on, this isn't going to work. And they say, why isn't it going to work? Well, people need money. Maybe you don't because mum and dad are loaded, whatever. But normal people need money. They can't go 2 weeks without money. And normal employers, I mean, let's face it, employers, I'm not the biggest fan of most employers, but they're having a fucking hard time of it right now. If there's any time you could say that employers are going to be less likely to be sympathetic to employees' issues,
it's when their own backs are against the walls.
Yeah, it's when they need as much income and as much hands to the pump as possible. This is a really bad time to start giving allowances. oh, they're away, such and such is away for 2 weeks. I can't do without them for 2 weeks. What, have they got COVID? No, they've just come back from holiday. But have they got COVID? Well, no, the government just says they have to be, isolated for 14 days. It's not practical for businesses or employees.
Is there, because I know obviously you can have it for a period of time without symptoms.
Yeah.
Is there a period of time between like catching it and when you can actually successfully test for it? So say like I got it today, and like, I don't know, you came over here now, give me a big sloppy snog, right? Which is just great.
We do, yeah.
And you had it, you gave it to me. If I'd have tested in an hour's time, is it possible that wouldn't show? Do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean by that? You have to wait a certain amount of time before you can actually successfully test for it.
From what I've read, I think in extreme circumstances it can incubate for up to about a week before people start showing symptoms. But I think generally,
yeah, but that wouldn't necessarily mean they wouldn't show positive on a test just because they haven't shown symptoms. You see what I mean?
No, that's what I'm sorry. That's what I mean. As in, it's a develop in the system, so it's traceable. But what I seem to remember reading is the average sort of time for it to incubate and become visible in the system is about 48 to 36 to 48 hours, I think. Sorry, no. Bad maths. 48 hours to 3 days. I think 2 or 3 days was what I read was about the average for someone to potentially contract it, incubate it, and then start to display either symptoms or have it test in their system. So you could possibly, it could possibly be if you contracted it the day before, you'd be none the wiser even with a test.
Well, if that was the case, yeah, I mean, if that was the case, then surely you say, okay, you quarantine yourself. Here's a test. You take this test in 3 days' time. Yeah. You get the test results back now, like sometimes the same day, the next day, definitely. Like, so that's only potentially a maximum a week of work, really, that people would need to miss.
Yeah, I think in practical terms, you would need a week to be absolutely certain, because like you say, you'd have to have 2 tests. You have to have a test immediately, and then if that's negative, you say, okay, we're going to have to wait because it could be incubating, and then 5 days later, a week later, second test, that's clear, great, off you go, back to your normal life, stay safe, etc. So yeah.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because you want to. It's that balance, isn't it? Between you want to be safe and sensible with regards to taking precautions, but there's a balance.
Yeah, and of course. I mean, at one stage, I was of the view that there wasn't a balance to be had because the infection rate was too high. We had to prioritise not infecting people. But now that a lot of people are back to work, and particularly businesses are not getting the support they were on furlough, you have to say, like, that's not realistic to say everyone who's had a holiday has to then have an additional 2 weeks off when they come back. So say a business has said, listen, we're quiet right now, but we need you to take your holidays one at a time, like one after the other if possible, to get them out of the way, because we can't afford everyone to have their holidays at the same time. So they're prepared to let someone go away. Now, even if they're going away for just a week in Spain, that then becomes 3 weeks that they don't have that employee for.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, anything else to add, Mike? Because I'm sure these will progress next week, and we can maybe.
Well, there'll be some talking points. I imagine lots of what would have happened around it between now and then. So,
yeah.
But no, for now, I think we've made our point.
Okay. Well, I've also had some information in, so I'm just gonna read a statement.
Okay, by all means, yeah.
That was provided to me. Get my reading glasses on.
Yeah.
So apparently, Late Night Lodge's lawyers have been advised to make an official apology to Nicola Jane Mayo. So we convey our deepest condolences to you, Nicola, for not producing a late night, or rather lockdown large last week through no fault of our own, technical difficulties. And hopefully you can enjoy having your manager in bed this
Beautiful. Sorry.
week.
That's like the most heartfelt sorry I think I've ever given a woman.
God. Quite, Mike. So I guess it's goodbye for this week, and we'll hopefully see you again next week, technology notwithstanding. Anything to add, Mike?
I don't think so. Just stay safe, people.
Stay safe. Keep your faces covered. Nobody wants to see them, all right? Now, I want to see you fit and healthy next week, and I want to see you advising your friends while they've got their masks on to click on that subscribe button. Now.
Yeah. Subscribe, like it, share it.
Word. We'll grow you next week, people.
Until next week.